This video should teach you how to spot and translate an indirect command. A command is when you tell someone to do something. Sit down. An indirect command is when that command is reported to someone else. The teacher told the boy to sit down. We can spot an indirect command very easily with the ut and ne that we see when we translate final clauses. The difference with an indirect command is, although we have the ut and the subjunctive, we also have a verb of ordering at the beginning of the sentence. Impero means I order. It's the same stem that we get imperator, a general, from. It's also one of those verbs in Latin that rather than taking an object, takes a dative case after it. So my indirect command here, the king ordered the citizens, what was the command? To defend the walls. I have an nt ending on defenderant because my citizens are of course plural, so they defend. Second sentence, pater liberus rogavit ut in horto luderent. Always useful to separate the clause off, ut to the verb. So turn one long sentence into two short ones. I have a subject, I have an object, and I have a verb. There's a preposition phrase, and there's a verb. The father asked the children. Now remember, ask can actually introduce an order as well. The policeman asked the man to move on. Yeah, that's really more of an order than a question. The father asked the children to play in the garden. Well, I beg your pardon, I've translated it as boys. The father asked the children to play in the garden. Again, the nt ending because it's a they. But the order, we would just say in English, to play. When these sentences become negative, as with final clauses, I use ne instead. So subject, verb, I've got a dative after impero. The general ordered the soldiers not to fear the enemy. Ne hostes timorent. Not to do something. Second sentence, let's put the brackets in. Subject, verb, filio, another dative case because persuadeo is another of those verbs in Latin that takes a dative case rather than an object. And again, notice that persuading is a kind of order. Maybe it's a very polite order. The mother persuaded her son not to eat all the food. Nice obvious object there, coming after the verb. Edo, I eat. We get the word edible from it. The mother persuaded her son not to eat all the food. Now, very rarely we actually get an indirect command where we have a subject in the clause. And in this kind of sentence, it's very difficult to translate it as to. So here, we're going to have to use that instead. The consuls ordered that the general leave as soon as possible. Leave is a funny tense here. It's an English subjunctive. That the general leave as soon as possible. Notice quam primum here. Quam normally with a superlative, as something as possible. Most often quam celerime, as quickly as possible. So the consuls ordered that the general leave as soon as possible. And you'll often find this kind of sentence when we have some kind of government business. So the Senate ordered that all citizens should wear a toga. And it's that kind of use especially. It is, however, quite rare. What tense am I using here? Well, as we've seen with final clauses, we're going to be using the imperfect subjunctive. Subjunctive because it's referring to something that may or may not happen. If I tell the boy to sit down, I don't know if he's going to sit down or not. I'm telling him to. How do I spot an imperfect subjunctive? Well, it's the easiest subjunctive to spot because I'm always looking for that infinitive in the middle of it. As soon as you see the infinitive plus an ending, that's the imperfect subjunctive. Finally, with indirect commands, we have to remember this verb as well, eubeo. Now, eubeo doesn't take an ut clause after it. Eubeo just takes an infinitive. So both these sentences mean the same thing. In my first one, I have the indirect command clause. The king ordered the citizens to defend the walls. The second one, well, I have what I probably would expect in English. So I have an infinitive, and then the infinitive has its own object. So slightly confusingly, I have the king ordered the citizens, and then its own little subsection to defend the walls. But eubeo you will always find just with an infinitive after it. To summarize then, indirect command, you're going to find a verb of ordering followed by ut or ne plus the subjunctive. And that subjunctive is going to be the imperfect subjunctive.